It's not a racist flag.
Yeah, it is. I'm not stupid.
Yes, you are.
When a kid asks a man why he has a Confederate flag, the man-child of an adult calls him stupid, amongst other things.
No, I'm not.
It's not a racist flag.
Yeah, it is.
It actually
Why don't you actually YouTube what the flag actually represents?
Oh my god, when I don't know what it actually looks like.
Do your research before you actually come to me and sound like a retard.
For those keeping score, YouTube what it means, followed by do your research, then calls a child a effing R word.
And
Oh, I'm the fucking retard?
you're the one coming to me telling me to remove a flag.
Yes.
It's a freedom that fly that
It's
flag.
goddamn racist.
It's a flag, and it's not racist.
Okay.
Do your research.
Maybe you should.
Okay.
My guy is lost in the sauce of the Confederacy, but he defends himself with this.
This is the flag the kid wanted me to remove. I see no problem with it at all. Uneducated little bastard.
God, I hope he doesn't procreate. We have gone over this plenty.
We are trying to figure out next steps, and my next step would be to get rid of all Confederate flags.
With Daryl Bubba Wallace leading the charge last year in the sport of NASCAR.
Look at your screen. This is a photo that NASCAR released showing the noose that was found in a black driver, Bubba Wallace's garage at the Talladega Super Speedway.
And this was the reaction from the pro-Confederacy crowd. Someone placed a noose inside Wallace's garage at Talladega Motor Speedway.
No one should feel uncomfortable when they come to a NASCAR race. So it starts with Confederate flags. Get them out of here. They have no place for them.
And when Confederates are pressed,
So why do you carry that flag? Because this is my heritage. My family fought to save their farm under this flag. Who was working that farm?
this is their reaction. Do you know where this is going? Do you?
My family was. Who was working the farm? They were poor. Do you know how much a slave cost back then?
Ruh-roh, looks like Confederate man made a big boo-boo.
There's an entire class of people in this country who are descended from people who were brought here as slaves.
They still had better lives here than they did back in Africa.
As slaves, they had better lives here.
There are some that would argue that. You can look that up. Their descendants, the descendants of those slaves, have much better lives here than the descendants of people who would have never gotten on those slave boats in Africa. And that's a provable fact.
And here's modern MAGA, supporters of the anti-American Confederacy who wanted democracy to cease so their dictator Donald Trump could regain power. For the 4 years of its existence until it was forced to surrender, the Confederate States of America was a pro-slavery nation at war against the U.S. The CSA was a big centralized state devoted to securing a society in which enslavement to white people was the permanent and inherited condition of all people of African descent. So for those that are watching this and you're crying, well, the Atlantic is the liberal agenda, the libby-lib-lib. All right, fine. Let's read from the fine print of the Confederate Constitution dated March 11th, 1861. In all such territory, the institution of N-word slavery as it now exists in the Confederate States shall be recognized and protected by Congress and by the territorial government.
Robert E. Lee was winning battle after battle after battle. So Robert E. Lee was a great general. They felt very strongly about the monument to Robert E. Lee, a great general. Whether you like it or not, he was one of the great generals. I've spoken to many generals here, right at the White House, and many people thought of the generals, they think that he was maybe their favorite general. People were there protesting the taking down of the monument of Robert E. Lee.
The Confederates built an explicitly white supremacist pro-slavery and anti-democratic nation state dedicated to the principle that all men are not created equal, emboldened by what they saw as the failure of emancipation in other parts of the world, buoyed by the new science of race, and convinced that the American vision of the people had been terribly betrayed. They sought the kind of future for human slavery and conservative Republican government that was no longer possible within the U.S.
New this morning, former President Trump denouncing the removal of the towering statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee in Richmond yesterday, which stood as the biggest Confederate statue in the nation. In addition to referring to the Confederate general as a, quote, unifying force, he also said, if we only had Robert E. Lee to command our troops in Afghanistan, that disaster would have ended in a complete and total victory many years ago. What an embarrassment we are suffering because we don't have the genius of a Robert E. Lee.
I mean, what more do you need? But we continue. we can keep going. This flag represents the Confederate States of America, created in 1861 when 11 states seceded from the 85-year-old nation. It was a response to Lincoln's anti-slavery views. To this day, we have the longer war prolonged by the losing side, which is, in short, how to interpret it because they continue to get it wrong. Claims that the flag represents culture and heritage instead of white supremacy are refuted by the words of those honored on Confederate monuments.
President Trump is drawing a line in the sand in the battle over renaming U.S. military bases that honor Confederate generals. Major military leaders are now agreeing that it's time, but the president is vowing to veto legislation to make that change.
In a tweet, the president said these monumental and very powerful bases have become part of a great American heritage. And his press secretary says that removing these names would be complete disrespect for the soldiers who trained there. But George, while the president is passionately defending keeping these names of the Confederate commanders on these bases, he has yet to put forth any ideas or specific reforms to address the killing of George Floyd.
Well, you understand why the flag is a painful symbol for many people because it's a reminder of slavery.
Well, people love it, and I know people that like the Confederate flag, and they're not thinking about slavery.
In his cornerstone speech of 1861, then Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander H. Stephens, said the Confederacy was founded on the principle that the N-word is not equal to the white man and that slavery's subordination to the superior race is his natural and normal condition. That statement highlights a truth that heritage cannot hide. The heritage of the Confederacy was white supremacy.
We won with highly educated. We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
This, at least for me, continues to ring hollow. Beginning in 1889, schools in the South subjected their students to the alternative reality of the lost cause, a false version of U.S. history developed in response to Reconstruction that minimizes slavery's central role in the Civil War, promotes the Confederacy's aim as a heroic one, glorifies the three Ks, and portrays the white South as the victim.
They framed the Confederate cause as a heroic defense of the Southern way of life against the overwhelming forces in the North. That narrative has a few basic tenets: the glorification of Confederate soldiers who died for a cause they believed in, the belief that slavery was a benevolent institution, and maybe most importantly, that slavery was not the root cause of the war.
And clearly, the upholdings of white supremacy are still around. Vox notes the following, which is extremely important.
So how did it become so deeply rooted in Southern memory? Blame the United Daughters of the Confederacy.
Yep, these punks. And if you're wondering, are they still around? Yeah, they are. Here are the states they have local chapters in, and Linda Edwards is the president general of the Losing Sides Brigade.